A shy black intern signed hello to a deaf guest, unaware the hotel's CEO was watching closely. The morning light filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Grandview Hotel's marble lobby, casting geometric shadows across the polished floor. Marcus Washington stood behind the concierge desk, his name tag catching the light, Marcus Washington, guest services intern. His hands were busy organizing brochures for the third time that morning, a nervous habit he'd developed during his first week at the hotel. At 23, Marcus had perfected the art of being present without being noticed. He kept his head slightly bowed, his shoulders curved inward, his voice soft when he spoke, which wasn't often. The other staff members moved around him like water around a stone, acknowledging his existence with brief nods but rarely including him in their conversations. He was adjusting a stack of restaurant menus when he noticed her. She was perhaps in her 60s, with silver hair pulled back in an elegant bun, wearing a navy blazer and pearl earrings. She stood near the entrance, her eyes scanning the lobby with an expression Marcus recognized instantly, the slightly lost look of someone trying to navigate an unfamiliar space while missing a crucial piece of information. Their eyes met. She smiled tentatively and began walking toward the front desk, but Marcus noticed something in the way she moved, the way her gaze followed people's mouths when they spoke to each other. He'd seen it before. Without thinking, Marcus stepped out from behind his desk. His heart hammered against his ribs. He rarely initiated contact with guests, but his hands were already moving. He raised his right hand to his chin, then moved it forward in a small arc. "Hello." The woman's face transformed. Her eyes widened, then crinkled with genuine delight. Her hands flew up in response, moving with the fluid grace of a native signer. "Hello, you sign." Marcus felt his face warm, but he continued signing, his movements becoming more confident. "Yes, can I help you find something? I'm checking in. I wasn't sure. Most places don't." Her hands hesitated, and Marcus understood the sentence she didn't finish. Most places don't accommodate. Most places don't try. "I'll help you," Marcus signed, gesturing toward the front desk. "What name is your reservation under?" What Marcus didn't know, couldn't have known, was that 3 floors above, standing at the window of his corner office, the CEO of Grandview Hotels International had witnessed the entire exchange. James Morrison was 58, with steel-gray hair and the kind of presence that made people straighten their posture when he entered a room. He'd built his hotel empire from a single struggling property into a chain of 43 luxury hotels across the country. He was known in the industry as demanding, exacting, and always watching. And right now, he was watching Marcus Washington. James picked up his phone and dialed. "Sandra, who is that young man at the concierge desk? The one who just helped the woman near the entrance?" His assistant's voice came through crisp and efficient. "That would be Marcus Washington, sir. He's one of the summer interns from the hospitality program at Meridian College. He's been here for 3 weeks. Pull his file. I want it on my desk in 10 minutes. James set down his phone and continued watching as Marcus led the deaf woman to the front desk, where he clearly explained the situation to Rebecca, the front desk manager, through a combination of signing and speaking. The woman was checked in within minutes, her face glowing with gratitude. But James Morrison wasn't just watching Marcus. He was watching how the other staff reacted to him, or rather, how they didn't react. How they moved around him as if he were invisible. How Rebecca barely acknowledged his help, simply taking over the check-in process without a word of thanks. James made a note in the small leather notebook he always carried. He'd built his empire on noticing what others missed. Marcus's journey to the Grandview Hotel had been neither straight nor easy. He'd grown up in the small town of Riverside, the youngest of 3 children in a working-class family. His father worked double shifts at the automotive plant. His mother cleaned houses to make ends meet. Marcus had been a quiet child, bookish and introspective, preferring the company of stories to people. When he was 12, a new family moved in next door. The Chens had a daughter, Lily, who was deaf. Marcus watched through his bedroom window as Lily played alone in her backyard, and something in her solitary games reminded him of himself. His mother, noticing his interest, had encouraged him. "Why don't you go introduce yourself?" "I don't know how to talk to her," Marcus had said. "Then learn," his mother had replied with the simple wisdom that had guided her through years of struggle. "The library has books. You're good at learning from books." So Marcus had learned. He'd checked out every book on American Sign Language the library owned, practicing in his mirror, his hands clumsy at first but gradually gaining fluency. 3 months later, he'd knocked on the Chen's door and introduced himself to Lily in halting signs. They'd been best friends for 6 years, until the Chens moved away when Marcus was 18. Lily had given him a photo of them together, signing on her back porch. On the back, she'd written, "You learned a whole language just to be my friend. Never forget how special that makes you." But Marcus had forgotten in a way. Or rather, he'd buried it beneath layers of self-doubt and invisibility. High school had been difficult. Marcus was black in a predominantly white school, quiet in a culture that valued loud confidence, intellectual in a place that celebrated athletic achievement. He'd learned to make himself small to take up less space, to avoid drawing attention that often turned negative. The scholarship to Meridian College had been his escape, but even there he'd struggled to find his place. The hospitality program was competitive, filled with confident students who seemed to know instinctively how to command a room, how to make an impression. Marcus had excellent grades but rarely spoke in class. His professors noted his potential but worried about his inability to project presence, the ineffable quality the hospitality industry supposedly required. The internship at Grandview Hotel was supposed to be his breakthrough, his chance to prove he belonged in this world. But 3 weeks in, he felt more invisible than ever. His supervisor, Derek Chen, no relation to Lily, though Marcus had felt a pang of hope when he'd first heard the name, was a 35-year-old assistant manager with a perpetual expression of mild annoyance. Derek had made it clear from day one that Marcus was an inconvenience. "Look," Derek had said during Marcus's orientation, barely glancing up from his tablet, "I didn't ask for an intern. Corporate assigned you to me. Just stay out of the way, do what you're told, and try not to make any major mistakes. I don't have time to babysit." The other staff had taken their cue from Derek. Rebecca at the front desk was polite but distant. Thomas, the head concierge, whose position Marcus was supposedly learning, treated him like a particularly slow child, explaining basic concepts with exaggerated patience while never actually letting Marcus do anything meaningful. The only person who consistently spoke to Marcus was Janine, one of the housekeepers. She was a woman in her 50s with warm, brown skin and laugh lines around her eyes. She'd brought Marcus coffee on his second day. "You look like you could use this," she'd said, setting down a steaming cup. "And don't mind Thomas. He treats everyone like that until you prove yourself. Problem is, he never gives anyone the chance to prove themselves." Marcus had smiled gratefully, and Janine had become his informal ally, offering encouragement in passing and occasionally sneaking him pastries from the continental breakfast. But mostly, Marcus spent his days reorganizing brochures, answering phones, and watching other people do the work he'd been trained to do. Until the morning he'd signed to the deaf woman. Her name was Alina Hartley, and she was checking in for a week-long stay while attending a conference at the convention center next door. "Thank you so much," she'd signed to Marcus after Rebecca had handed her the room keys. "You have no idea how rare this is, how wonderful it feels to be understood." Marcus had felt something shift inside him, a small crack in the armor of invisibility he'd built around himself. For just a moment, he'd mattered. What he didn't know was that the moment had mattered to someone else, too. James Morrison's corner office was a study in controlled luxury. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city, but James rarely looked at the view. His attention was focused on the tablet in his hands, scrolling through Marcus Washington's file. Academic records, excellent. Consistent 3.8 GPA, Dean's List every semester, particular strength in customer service theory and hospitality ethics. Recommendations from professors uniformly positive, though several noted the same concern. Lacks confidence in interpersonal situations. Needs to work on assertiveness. Brilliant on paper, struggles with real-world application. Internship evaluations so far, minimal. Derek had submitted 2 brief reports, both essentially saying Marcus completed assigned tasks adequately, but showed no initiative. James set down the tablet and steepled his fingers, thinking. He'd started as a bellhop himself, 40 years ago, at a hotel not unlike this one. He'd been young, ambitious, and desperate to prove himself. But what he remembered most from those early days wasn't the successful moments. It was the crushing sensation of being overlooked, of having ideas dismissed because of his youth, his lack of pedigree, his wrong side of the tracks accent. He'd vowed that if he ever ran a hotel, he'd pay attention to the overlooked ones. That vow had made him successful. While other hoteliers focused on hiring charismatic managers and flashy marketing, James had built his reputation on exceptional service delivered by well-trained staff who felt valued. He discovered that the quiet ones, the ones others dismissed, often made the best employees if someone gave them a chance. He'd also discovered that the best way to understand how a hotel really operated was to watch it when people thought he wasn't watching. James picked up his phone again. Sandra, clear my schedule for the next week. I'm going to be spending time on the floor. Sir, Sandra's voice carried a note of surprise. James rarely left his office during operational hours. I want to observe operations, anonymously as much as possible. I'll be around the lobby, the restaurants, the conference rooms. Tell the managers I'm conducting a routine evaluation, but don't make a fuss about it. Of course, sir. Should I inform them which aspects you'll be focusing on? James smiled slightly. No, let's see what they show me when they're trying to look good versus what they show me when they think I'm not paying attention. He hung up and returned to the window, watching Marcus below. The young man had returned to his desk and was back to his nervous habit of reorganizing brochures. James had a theory about talent. It didn't disappear just because it was overlooked. It went dormant, waiting for the right conditions to emerge. He wanted to know what conditions Marcus Washington needed. By noon, Marcus's moment of confidence had faded back into his usual anxiety. Derek had appeared shortly after Alina Hartley checked in, his expression irritated. Marcus, why were you away from your desk? Thomas said you just walked away to help some guest. That's not your job. Your job is to stay at your station and answer phones, Marcus had tried to explain. She was deaf and she looked lost. I just wanted to help her find. If a guest needs help, they'll ask someone qualified. Your job is to observe and learn, not to freelance. Derek had looked down at his tablet, already moving on to his next task. Stick to your assigned duties. Marcus had nodded, feeling the familiar weight of inadequacy settle over him. He'd overstepped. He should have stayed in his place. The afternoon crawled by. Marcus answered phones, transferred calls, and watched Thomas handle the work that Marcus had spent 4 years learning to do. At 2:00 p.m., a family arrived with multiple suitcases, and Marcus moved to help them. I've got this, Thomas said smoothly, stepping in front of Marcus with a practiced smile. Mr. and Mrs. Patterson, welcome back to Grandview. Allow me to assist you with your bags. Marcus stepped back, invisible again. At 3:30, he saw Alina Hartley return to the lobby, dressed for a conference. She caught his eye and signed a quick greeting. Marcus signed back, a small smile breaking through his careful neutrality. Rebecca noticed. Marcus, guests expect verbal communication in a professional setting. I know you were trying to be helpful earlier, but it's better to direct guests with special needs to someone trained in accommodations. I am trained, Marcus said quietly. I've been signing for 11 years. Rebecca looked surprised, but recovered quickly. That's nice, but we have protocols. Just check with me first next time, okay? Marcus nodded. Always check. Always wait for permission. Always remember you're just an intern. What none of them noticed was James Morrison sitting in the lobby lounge, partially hidden behind a newspaper, watching everything. James had changed from his suit into business casual khakis and a polo shirt. He'd removed his distinctive presidential pin. In this outfit, he looked like any other businessman waiting for a meeting. The staff glanced at him occasionally but didn't recognize him. He'd witnessed Derek's reprimand. He'd seen Thomas cut Marcus off. He'd noticed Rebecca's dismissive comment. And he'd seen the light go out of Marcus's eyes each time. James made notes in his leather notebook. But he was also forming a plan. He stood up, folded his newspaper, and walked toward the concierge desk. Marcus was alone there. Thomas had gone on his break. Excuse me, young man, James said, modulating his voice to sound less authoritative than usual. I'm trying to find a good restaurant for tonight, something with live jazz if possible. My wife loves jazz. Marcus looked up, and James saw him take a small breath, preparing himself for interaction. Of course, sir. What type of cuisine does your wife prefer? His voice was soft but clear, and James noticed the careful way he made eye contact, brief but genuine, respectful but engaged. She's not picky, but she loves good seafood. Marcus's face brightened slightly. Then I'd recommend the Blue Note on Waterfront Street. They have excellent seafood and live jazz every night starting at 7. The atmosphere is intimate but not stuffy. He pulled out a brochure and a map, marking the location with a pen. It's about a 10-minute drive, but if you prefer, I can arrange a taxi for you. James took the map, impressed. The recommendation was perfect. He'd been to the Blue Note himself and knew it was exactly what he'd described wanting. Thank you, this is very helpful. How did you know about this place? Marcus hesitated, then said quietly, I try to learn about all the local establishments. It's part of the training to be able to offer informed recommendations. Part of the training, James repeated. So you're in a hospitality program? Yes, sir. I'm an intern here this summer. Marcus gestured to his name tag. And do you enjoy it? The question seemed to catch Marcus off guard. He opened his mouth, closed it, then said carefully, I'm learning a lot. James recognized a diplomatic non-answer when he heard one. But he also saw something else, a flash of longing in Marcus's eyes, quickly suppressed. This young man wanted to do more. He wanted to matter. Well, Marcus, thank you for the recommendation. If the restaurant is as good as you say, I'll be sure to mention you gave me the tip. Marcus smiled, genuine surprise and pleasure crossing his face. Thank you, sir. I hope you and your wife enjoy it. James walked away, already adding notes to his mental file. Marcus knew his material. He had good instincts. He was thoughtful and thorough, but something or someone was crushing that potential before it could fully emerge. James needed to understand what was happening beneath the surface, and he needed to do it without his presence changing the dynamic. That evening, Marcus sat in the break room, eating a sandwich he'd brought from home and reviewing his hospitality textbooks. He had an exam coming up, and despite everything, he was determined to excel academically even if his practical experience was lacking. Janine came in looking tired from a long shift. She saw Marcus and smiled. Still here. Boy, you work harder than people who get paid, Marcus shrugged. Just trying to make the most of the opportunity. Janine poured herself coffee and sat down across from him. I saw what you did this morning with the deaf lady. That was really something. Derek didn't think so. Derek's an ass, Janine said bluntly, then softened her tone. Sorry, I shouldn't speak about management that way, but between you and me, that man wouldn't know good service if it checked into his hotel room. Marcus smiled despite himself. He's just doing his job. His job is to develop talent, not squash it. Janine took a sip of her coffee. You know what your problem is, Marcus? You're too nice. You let people make you smaller than you are. I'm an intern. I'm supposed to learn not use the skills you already have, not help guests when you can clearly see they need help, not be yourself. Janine shook her head. I've worked in hotels for 30 years. I've seen hundreds of interns come through. Most of them are so busy trying to impress people they forget why they're really here. But you genuinely care about helping people. That's rare, that's valuable. Don't let anyone make you forget that. Marcus felt his throat tighten with unexpected emotion. Thank you, he managed. You're welcome, honey. Janine stood up, patting his shoulder. Now I've got to get home to my own kids. You get some rest too. Tomorrow's a new day. After she left, Marcus sat alone in the break room, thinking about what she'd said. Somewhere along the way, he'd confused humility with invisibility. He'd thought making himself small would keep him safe from judgment, from rejection, from failure. But maybe it was also keeping him from the very thing he wanted most, to actually make a difference. His phone buzzed, a text from his mother. How's my baby doing at that fancy hotel? Making us proud? Marcus stared at the message for a long moment. Then he typed back, Trying to, Mom, really trying. The next morning, James Morrison arrived at the hotel at 6:00 a.m. before most of the staff. He wanted to observe the morning shift change to see how communication flowed between departments. He positioned himself in the lobby lounge again, this time with a laptop, looking like an early rising business guest catching up on work. Derek arrived at 6:45, already on his phone, already looking harried. He didn't greet the night shift staff as they prepared to leave. He didn't check in with the front desk. He went straight to his office and closed the door. Thomas arrived at 7:00, immaculate in his designer suit, greeting regular guests by name but ignoring the cleaning staff as they finished up the lobby. Marcus arrived at 7:15, earlier than his required 7:30 start time. James watched him stop to help Janine carry a heavy cart of supplies, then move to his desk and begin his day. At 8:00, the morning manager meeting happened in the conference room adjacent to the lobby. James had positioned himself where he could hear the conversation through the partially open door. Derek's voice carried clearly. And we need to hit our customer satisfaction scores this month. Corporate is watching. I need everyone on their A game. Rebecca's voice. What about the interns? Should we be utilizing them more for guest services? Thomas, dismissive. They're interns. We can't put them in front of guests for anything important. They're not ready. Marcus seems capable, Rebecca said, and James was pleased to hear a note of fairness in her voice. He handled that situation with the deaf guest quite well yesterday. He should have checked with you first, Derek said firmly. We have protocols for a reason. I don't want interns freelancing with guests. It's a liability. A liability. James wrote that word in his notebook, underlining it twice. The meeting continued, but James had heard enough. He closed his laptop and stood up, a plan forming. He walked to the front desk where a young clerk was organizing check-in paperwork. Excuse me, I'd like to speak with your general manager, please. The clerk looked nervous. Is there a problem, sir? No problem. I'd just like to speak with whoever's in charge. That would be Mr. Morrison, but he's not typically. Then the assistant manager will do. 5 minutes later, Derek appeared, his professional smile in place. Good morning, sir. I'm Derek Chen, assistant manager. How can I help you? James handed him a business card, not his CEO card, but one that identified him as a representative from the National Hospitality Excellence Institute, a real organization that evaluated hotels for industry awards. James served on their board, so the card wasn't fake, just strategically deployed. "My name is James Hartfield," James said, using his middle name. "I'm here to conduct a preliminary evaluation for the Hospitality Excellence Awards. We've received a nomination for Grandview Hotel." Derek's eyes widened. The Hospitality Excellence Awards were prestigious, and winning one could significantly boost a property's reputation. "That's wonderful. We had no idea. When did the nomination come through?" "The nominations are confidential until the evaluation is complete. That's why I'm here in an observational capacity. I'll be spending time in various areas of the hotel over the next few days, watching how you operate. I should tell you that we place particular emphasis on staff development and inclusive service practices." Of course, of course. Whatever you need, Mr. Hartfield. Would you like a tour?" "No, I prefer to observe naturally. Just go about your business as usual." "That gives me the most accurate picture." After Derek hurried off, no doubt to warn everyone to be on their best behavior, James returned to his position in the lounge. He felt only slightly guilty about the deception. Everything he'd said was technically true, he just hadn't mentioned that he was also the CEO of the company being evaluated. Sometimes, to see the truth, you had to create a shadow to hide in. Over the next 3 days, the dynamic at the hotel shifted subtly. Word spread that an evaluator was present, and everyone became suddenly attentive to their performance. Derek emerged from his office more often, smiling at guests, checking in with staff. Thomas became even more meticulous, demonstrating his expertise at every opportunity. Rebecca maintained her professional demeanor but added extra warmth to her guest interactions. And Marcus remained Marcus, quiet, efficient, helpful, but still kept at arm's length from meaningful work. James watched it all, making notes, but he was waiting for something specific, an opportunity. It came on Thursday afternoon. Alina Hartley approached the concierge desk looking distressed. Marcus wasn't there. He'd been sent to the back office to file paperwork, another task designed to keep him away from guests. Thomas was handling the desk. James was close enough to hear Alina's frustrated voice. "I need to book tickets for the theater tonight. The play has ASL interpretation, but the booking website is having technical problems. Can you help me?" Thomas smiled his professional smile. "Of course, let me call the theater for you." He picked up the phone, but James could see Alina's frustration growing. She couldn't hear the phone conversation. She didn't know what was being said on her behalf. Thomas wasn't looking at her as he spoke, wasn't including her in the process. James stood up and walked to the desk. "Excuse me, do you have a computer I could use for a moment? I need to send an urgent email." Thomas looked annoyed at the interruption, but gestured to a terminal at the side of the desk. "Of course, sir." James sat down and, instead of opening email, opened an instant message to Derek's computer. He saw Derek in his office through the glass wall, watching his screen. The message was brief. "This is Morrison. Send Marcus to the concierge desk immediately. Trust me." He saw Derek's head snap up, looking around the lobby. Their eyes met briefly, and James gave an almost imperceptible nod. Derek stood up and disappeared. 30 seconds later, Marcus appeared from the back office, looking confused and worried. Being suddenly summoned was rarely a good sign. Thomas was still on the phone with the theater. Marcus arrived at the desk and saw Alina. He saw her body language, the frustration, the disconnection. Without being asked, without checking with Thomas first, Marcus stepped forward and signed to Alina. "What do you need? Can I help?" Alina's relief was immediate. Her hands moved quickly, explaining the situation. Marcus nodded, understanding, then gently interrupted Thomas. "Excuse me, I can handle this." Thomas looked annoyed. "I'm in the middle of, I know, but I can communicate with the guest directly. It will be faster and better for her." For a moment, Thomas looked like he would argue. But then he saw Derek standing nearby, watching, and he remembered the evaluator was somewhere in the hotel. He handed Marcus the phone with poor grace. Marcus turned to Alina and signed. "I'm going to call the theater. Tell me exactly what you want, and I'll make sure they understand. I'll interpret everything they say so you know what's happening." For the next 10 minutes, Marcus orchestrated the ticket booking with remarkable skill. Spoke clearly to the theater representative while simultaneously signing the entire conversation to Alina. When the theater staff had questions, Marcus interpreted Alina's signed responses into clear, detailed instructions. He confirmed seating locations, accessibility needs, payment information, everything Alina needed. When it was done, Alina was beaming. She signed to Marcus. Thank you so much. You don't know what it means to be truly included like this, not just accommodated." Marcus signed back. Everyone deserves to be heard. I'm glad I could help. James Morrison, watching from his position at the computer, felt something stir in his chest, a recognition, a confirmation. This was what hospitality meant. Not just service, but true understanding. Not just meeting needs, but seeing people. Elena left, her tickets printed and her evening plans secured. Marcus turned back to his desk, and for a moment James saw confidence in his posture that hadn't been there before. But then Derek approached, his expression unreadable. "Marcus, a word in my office, please." The confidence evaporated. Marcus followed Derek, his shoulders already beginning to curve inward. James stood up, abandoning any pretense of working at the computer. He walked directly to Derek's office and knocked on the open door just as Derek was beginning to speak. "Mr. Chen, may I interrupt for a moment?" Derek turned, surprise evident on his face. "Mr. Hartfield, of course, is something wrong?" "Not at all. I just wanted to tell you that I observed Mr. Washington's interaction with the guest just now. It was exceptional. Exactly the kind of inclusive service practice we look for in our evaluations." James turned to Marcus, who was standing awkwardly to the side, clearly expecting to be reprimanded. "Man, how long have you been studying sign language?" 11 years, sir," Marcus said quietly. 11 years, and the hotel is aware of this skill?" Marcus glanced at Derek. I mentioned it in my application, sir." "Did you?" James turned back to Derek, his expression pleasant but his eyes sharp. "And have you been utilizing this skill appropriately?" Derek's face reddened slightly. "We have protocols for guest accommodations. We want to ensure interns don't exceed their training." "I see." "And in your professional opinion, did Mr. Washington exceed his training just now, or did he provide excellent service to a guest in need?" The trap was evident, and Derek was smart enough to recognize it. "He provided excellent service." "Indeed he did." James pulled out his phone, his real phone, with his real contact information. "Mr. Washington, I'd like to speak with you further about your approach to inclusive hospitality. Would you be available for a meeting tomorrow morning?" "Say 9:00 a.m. I'm staying in room 412. Marcus looked stunned. Yes, sir, I'd be honored." "Excellent, I'll see you then," James nodded to Derek. "Thank you for your time, Mr. Chen. Continue as you were." He left the office, leaving behind a confused intern and a worried assistant manager. Marcus couldn't sleep that night. He lay in his small apartment, staring at the ceiling, replaying the day's events over and over. He'd helped Elena. That felt good. That felt right, but he'd also broken protocol again. Despite Mr. Hartfield's praise, Derek had made it clear after the evaluator left that Marcus was making things complicated. "I know he praised you," Derek had said, his voice tight, "but you can't keep stepping outside your role. It puts me in a difficult position. What if something had gone wrong? What if the guest had complained? I'm responsible for you, Marcus, and I need you to work within the system, not around it." Marcus had nodded, apologized, promised to be more careful, but inside something was shifting. Janine's words kept echoing. "You let people make you smaller than you are." Was he? Had he spent so long protecting himself from judgment that he'd forgotten how to actually be good at what he did? His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "This is Elena Hartley. The concierge gave me your work email, which I used to get your number from the staff directory. I hope that's okay. I just wanted to say thank you again. Because of you, I was able to fully enjoy the theater tonight. The performance was beautiful, and I understood every word. You gave that to me. Thank you for seeing me, not just my disability. You're going to be amazing in this industry." Marcus read the message 3 times, his eyes stinging. When was the last time someone had told him he was going to be amazing at something? When was the last time he'd believed it himself? He texted back, "Thank you so much for saying that. It means more than you know. I'm glad you enjoyed the show." Then he set down his phone and allowed himself to imagine something he'd been too afraid to imagine before. What if he was actually good at this? What if he belonged? At 8:55 a.m., Marcus stood outside room 412, his heart pounding. He'd worn his best shirt and tie. He'd rehearsed what he might say. He'd also prepared himself for disappointment. Maybe Mr. Hartfield had just been being polite. Maybe this meeting would be nothing. He knocked at exactly 9:00. "Come in," a voice called. Marcus opened the door and stepped into a suite, not a regular room. It was elegant, expensive, with a sitting area separate from the bedroom. Mr. Hartfield sat at the desk, but he wasn't alone. Derek was there looking nervous. Thomas was there looking confused. Rebecca was there looking curious. And standing by the window was a woman Marcus recognized from the corporate orientation materials, Sandra Park, the executive assistant to the CEO. Marcus's stomach dropped. What was happening? Mr. Hartfield stood up and something about his posture changed. The slightly affable businessman demeanor dropped away, replaced by something more commanding, more authoritative. "Mr. Washington, thank you for coming. Please sit down." He gestured to a chair that had been positioned to face the others. I have something to tell you, and I think it's going to come as a surprise. My name isn't James Hartfield, it's James Morrison. I'm the CEO of Grandview Hotels International. The room tilted. Marcus gripped the arms of the chair, trying to process the information. James continued, his voice calm but firm. I've been observing operations at this hotel for the past week. I came because I saw something that concerned me: talent being wasted, potential being suppressed, and protocols being used as excuses for poor management. He turned to Derek, and Marcus saw his supervisor pale. Mr. Chen, how long has Mr. Washington been interning here? 3 weeks, sir. And in those 3 weeks, how many opportunities have you given him to actually practice hospitality services with guests? Derek swallowed. He's been learning procedures, observing. How many opportunities? James repeated. Sir, interns need to understand the systems before we put them in guest-facing roles. That's not what I asked. The answer is none. You've given him no opportunities. Instead, you've had him filing paperwork and organizing brochures while you and Mr. Hamilton handle all guest interactions. Is that correct? Thomas shifted uncomfortably. Derek's face was red. James pulled out his leather notebook. Let me tell you what I've observed. I've seen Mr. Washington arrive early every day. I've seen him help other staff members without being asked. I've seen him demonstrate knowledge of local establishments, fluency in American Sign Language, and genuine care for guest experience. I've also seen him being ignored, dismissed, and actively prevented from doing the work he was trained to do. He turned to Marcus. Mr. Washington, you wrote in your internship application that you wanted to learn how to create inclusive hospitality experiences. Is that correct? Marcus found his voice. Yes, sir. And why is that important to you? Marcus thought about Lily, about learning a whole language just to be someone's friend. He thought about Alina's message last night. He thought about all the times he'd been overlooked, invisible, dismissed. Because everyone deserves to be seen, Marcus said, his voice stronger than he expected. Not just accommodated, but truly seen and valued. That's what hospitality should be, not just providing services, but providing dignity. The room was silent for a moment. Then James nodded, a small smile on his face. That's the correct answer. That's the philosophy this company was built on, though I'm concerned we may have lost sight of it in some of our properties. He looked at Derek again. Mr. Chen, you told me that Mr. Washington was a liability. I want to be clear. The liability isn't Mr. Washington. The liability is managers who can't recognize talent when they see it. Derek looked like he wanted to sink through the floor. However, James continued, his tone softening slightly, I also recognize that you're overworked, understaffed, and under pressure to meet metrics that don't always align with good hospitality. Those are systemic issues, not personal failures. But they are issues we're going to address. He turned to the whole group. Here's what's going to happen. First, Mr. Washington is no longer going to be treated as just an intern observing from the sidelines. He's going to be given real responsibilities with real guests, starting today. Second, we're going to implement a new training program for all interns at all Grandview properties, one that emphasizes hands-on learning and skills development. Third, Ms. Park is going to work with each of you to understand what resources you need to better support developing talent. Sandra stepped forward, tablet in hand. I'll be scheduling individual meetings with each of you over the next week. This is an opportunity, not a punishment. Mr. Morrison wants to understand how we can improve our systems. James looked at Marcus. Mr. Washington, I have a proposition for you. Would you be willing to extend your internship through the fall semester? I'd like to develop a case study on inclusive hospitality services, and I think you'd be the ideal person to help build that program. Marcus couldn't breathe. This couldn't be real. Things like this didn't happen to people like him. Yes, sir, I would be honored. Good, you'll work with Sandra to develop your new schedule and responsibilities. You'll also receive a stipend for the extended internship. And Mr. Washington? James's expression softened. Stop making yourself small. You have skills this industry desperately needs. Use them. The meeting ended and Marcus walked out in a daze. Derek caught up with him in the hallway, looking shaken and genuinely contrite. Marcus, I owe you an apology, a real one. Derek ran a hand through his hair. I was so focused on protecting myself, on not making mistakes, that I didn't see what was right in front of me. You're talented. You're capable. And I shut you down because it was easier than taking a risk on someone unproven. Marcus didn't know what to say. He'd imagined this moment, imagined Derek realizing he'd been wrong, but now that it was happening, he didn't feel the triumph he'd expected. Instead, he just felt tired. Thank you for saying that, Marcus said finally. I understand the pressure you're under, I do, but Derek, it's not just about me. How many other people have you overlooked because they didn't fit your idea of what talent looks like? Derek flinched. You're right, you're absolutely right. He paused, then said, I'd like to start over if you're willing. I want to learn how to be better at this. Marcus studied him for a moment, then nodded. Okay, let's start over. Thomas appeared then, looking uncomfortable. Marcus, can we talk? They moved to a quiet corner of the hallway. Thomas was clearly struggling with what to say. I treated you like you were invisible, he said finally. I did it because when I was an intern, that's how I was treated. I thought it was just how things worked. But Morrison is right. That's not developing talent. That's just perpetuating bad habits. Why didn't you include me? Marcus asked, the question that had been burning inside him for weeks. I tried so hard to learn from you to prove I could do the work, but you never gave me a chance, Thomas sighed. Honestly. Because I was afraid you'd be better at it than me. You're naturally good with people, I can see that now. I had to learn it, had to construct this persona of the perfect concierge. But you actually care. That scared me because it meant I might be replaceable. The honesty was unexpected and painful. Marcus realized that the invisibility he'd experienced wasn't always about him being lacking. Sometimes it was about other people's insecurities and fears. You're not replaceable, Marcus said. You have years of experience and knowledge I don't have. But maybe we could work together. Maybe there's room for different approaches. Thomas looked surprised, then grateful. I'd like that. I really would. That afternoon, James Morrison called a staff meeting in the hotel's main conference room. Every employee was there, from housekeeping to management, about 70 people total. James stood at the front, his presence commanding but not intimidating. I want to talk to you about what makes a hotel truly excellent. It's not the marble floors or the expensive art or even the thread count of the sheets. It's the people. It's you. He gestured around the room. Every person in this room contributes to the experience our guests have. From the housekeeper who leaves a mint on the pillow to the front desk clerk who remembers a returning guest's name to the concierge who takes time to really understand what someone needs. You are Grandview Hotels. He paused, letting that sink in. But here's what I've observed this week. We've created systems that sometimes work against you. We've created hierarchies that silence valuable voices. We've created metrics that measure efficiency but not empathy. And that needs to change. James pulled out his phone and projected an image on the screen behind him, Marcus signing with a leaner, captured by the lobby security camera. This moment happened earlier this week. One of our interns, Marcus Washington, saw a guest in need and stepped forward to help, using skills he'd developed over 11 years of practice. He provided exceptional, inclusive service, but he wasn't supposed to do that. He was supposed to stay at his desk and answer phones because he's just an intern. The room was silent, everyone listening intently. I'm going to say something I shouldn't have to say, but apparently I do. Talent doesn't respect hierarchies. Excellence doesn't wait for permission. And if we create a culture where people are afraid to use their skills to help others, we've failed at the most basic purpose of hospitality. James turned off the projector. So here's what's changing. First, every employee, regardless of position, is empowered to solve guest problems using their best judgment. You won't be punished for taking initiative to help someone. Second, we're implementing a new recognition program where any employee can nominate any other employee for going above and beyond. Third, we're restructuring our internship and training programs to focus on hands-on learning. He smiled. And fourth, I'm going to start spending more time on the floor of our properties, not to catch people making mistakes, but to catch people doing things right. Because I've realized that too often the best work happening in our hotels is invisible to the people making the decisions. Janine caught Marcus's eye from across the room and gave him a proud nod. Marcus felt his face warm, but he smiled back. James continued. I want to close with this. Every person in this room has something valuable to contribute. Some of you are extroverts who shine in guest interaction. Some of you are detail-oriented and make sure everything runs smoothly behind the scenes. Some of you have specialized skills that make you uniquely qualified to help certain guests. All of it matters. All of you matter. My challenge to each of you is this. Stop making yourself smaller than you are. Stop hiding your talents because you're afraid of judgment or failure. Stop letting titles and hierarchies convince you that you can't make a difference. You can. And when you do, you don't just help guests, you elevate this entire organization. After the meeting, employees lingered, talking among themselves with an energy that had been absent before. Marcus stood to the side, still processing everything that had happened. Eleanor Hartley appeared beside him. She'd been invited to the meeting as a guest who had experienced the service being discussed. She signed to Marcus. I came back to the hotel today to extend my stay. Do you know why? Because for the first time in years of traveling, I felt like I was treated as a person, not a problem to be solved. You did that. Don't ever underestimate the impact of really seeing people. Marcus signed back. Thank you for teaching me that it's okay to step forward. I almost didn't. I almost stayed at my desk. Alina smiled. But you didn't. You chose to be brave. Keep choosing that. 3 months later, Marcus sat in James Morrison's office, the real one, at corporate headquarters, presenting his findings on inclusive hospitality services. The internship had been transformative. Marcus had spent the fall semester working directly with guests, documenting situations where inclusive service made a difference, and developing training materials for other employees. He discovered that his quiet nature wasn't a weakness but a strength. It made him observant, thoughtful, and genuinely focused on others rather than himself. So in conclusion, Marcus said, clicking to his final slide, implementing these inclusive service practices resulted in a 34% increase in positive feedback from guests with disabilities, a 28% increase in return bookings from this demographic, and perhaps most significantly, a 45% increase in staff satisfaction scores related to feeling empowered to use their skills. James leaned back in his chair, studying the data. This is excellent work, Marcus. Have you considered what you want to do after graduation? I'd like to continue this work, Marcus said. I think there's so much potential in training hospitality professionals to think beyond accommodation to true inclusion, not just for disability, but for all forms of diversity, cultural, linguistic, economic, everything. I agree, which is why I'd like to offer you a position. We're creating a new role, Director of Inclusive Hospitality Services. It would involve traveling to our properties, conducting training, developing programs, and serving as a resource for our staff. You'd be part of our corporate team, reporting directly to me. Marcus's eyes widened. Sir, I haven't even graduated yet. I'm only 23. And I was 24 when I bought my first hotel. Age doesn't determine capability. Your work does, so what do you say? Marcus thought about the shy young man who'd arrived at Grandview Hotel 6 months ago, convinced he had to make himself invisible to survive. He thought about Alina's encouragement, Janine's wisdom, and James's belief in him. He thought about Lily and the photo she'd given him all those years ago. I say yes, sir. Thank you. James stood up and extended his hand. Welcome to Grandview Hotels International, Marcus. Now stop calling me sir. We're colleagues. As Marcus shook his hand, he realized something profound. Being seen wasn't just about others recognizing your value. It was about recognizing it yourself. It was about deciding you were worth paying attention to, worth investing in, worth believing in. He'd spent so many years trying to be invisible, thinking it would protect him. But what it had really done was protect him from living fully, from using his gifts, from connecting with others. No more. 2 years later, Marcus stood in front of 200 hospitality students at his alma mater, Meridian College, giving the keynote address for the annual Hospitality Excellence Conference. When I was sitting where you are, Marcus began, his voice clear and confident, I thought success meant having all the answers, never making mistakes, and always knowing exactly what to say. I thought I had to be someone different, someone louder, more assertive, more conventionally confident to succeed in this industry. He clicked to a slide showing him signing with Alina. But then something happened that changed everything. I took a risk. I stepped forward when I could have stayed back, and someone was watching not to judge me, but to recognize something I couldn't see in myself. He told the story of his internship, of being overlooked and dismissed, of the moment James Morrison had revealed himself and changed the trajectory of Marcus's career. But he also told the harder parts, about his own complicity and his invisibility, about how he'd hidden his talents because he was afraid of being judged for them. Here's what I learned, Marcus said. The hospitality industry doesn't need you to be loud. It needs you to be present. It doesn't need you to be perfect. It needs you to be genuine, and it doesn't need you to fit some predetermined mold. It needs you to bring your whole self, your unique perspective, your specific skills, your authentic care for others. He paused, looking out at the sea of young faces. Some of you are probably sitting there thinking you're not good enough yet, that you need to learn more, be more, prove more before you can really contribute. I'm here to tell you that's a lie. You're ready now, not because you have all the answers, but because you care. And caring, truly seeing people and wanting to help them is the foundation of everything else. After the speech, students lined up to talk to him. Many of them shared their own stories of feeling overlooked, of struggling to find their place. Marcus listened to each one, offering encouragement and advice, seeing in their faces his younger self. One young woman, shy and soft-spoken, asked, "How do you stop being afraid?" Marcus smiled. "You don't. I'm still afraid sometimes." But I learned that being brave doesn't mean not being afraid. It means deciding that helping others matters more than protecting yourself from potential rejection. What if I make mistakes? You will make mistakes. Everyone does, but mistakes are how we learn. The only real failure is refusing to try because you're afraid of failing. She thanked him and walked away looking a little more hopeful, a little more confident. Marcus watched her go, sending up a silent wish that someone would see her potential the way James Morrison had seen his. That evening, Marcus met James for dinner at the Blue Note, the jazz restaurant Marcus had recommended so long ago. "You did well today," James said as they settled into their table. The stage was being prepared for the evening's performance. "Those students needed to hear your story." "I hope it helps some of them," Marcus said. "I keep thinking about how close I came to giving up if you hadn't intervened. But I did intervene, and you know why? Because I saw myself in you. When I was young, I was overlooked too, dismissed as just a bellhop with ambition but no prospects. Someone gave me a chance, and it changed my life. I've spent my career trying to pay that forward. You've done more than that. You've built an entire company culture around it." James took a sip of his wine. "The culture is only as strong as the people who embody it. That's why I needed you, Marcus. You understand on a deep level what it means to be overlooked. That perspective is invaluable. You can spot talent that others miss because you were that talent once." Marcus smiled. "I still am sometimes. I still have moments where I doubt myself, where I want to shrink back." "Good. That means you're human. Just don't let those moments define you." James leaned forward. "I want to talk to you about something. I'm planning to retire in 5 years. I'm going to start transitioning leadership responsibilities to the executive team. I want you to be part of that team." Marcus felt his heart skip. "James, I'm only 25. I've been in this position for 2 years. And in those 2 years, you've transformed how our company approaches service. You've trained over 3,000 employees. You've increased our accessibility ratings across all properties. You've made Grandview Hotels a place where everyone, staff and guests, feels valued." James smiled. "Age is just a number, Marcus. Impact is what matters." "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll think about it. Say you'll continue growing and learning. Say you'll keep being exactly who you are." The jazz band started playing, filling the restaurant with smooth, soulful music. Marcus sat back, letting the sound wash over him, thinking about the journey that had brought him here. He thought about the shy intern who almost didn't sign hello to a deaf guest. He thought about the woman who had thanked him for seeing her. He thought about the CEO who had watched and waited and then stepped forward at exactly the right moment. He thought about all the small acts of courage that had led to this moment, all the times someone had to choose between staying safe and stepping forward. "I'll do it," Marcus said suddenly. "I'll be part of the executive team. Because if I can help create a company where people like me, people who are overlooked, who feel invisible, who have gifts they're afraid to share, if I can help create a place where they're seen and valued, then it's worth the fear." James raised his glass. "To being seen." Marcus clinked his glass against James's. "To seeing others." 5 years later, Marcus stood in the executive boardroom of Grandview Hotels International as James Morrison officially announced his retirement and the new leadership structure. "It is my honor," James said, looking around at the gathered executives, board members, and senior staff, "to introduce your new Chief Operations Officer, Marcus Washington." The room erupted in applause. Marcus stepped forward, shaking James's hand as cameras flashed. He was 30 years old, the youngest person ever to hold this position in the company's history. But more important than the title was what it represented. A company culture that truly valued seeing people, not just for who they were, but for who they could become. That afternoon, Marcus returned to the original Grandview Hotel, the one where his journey had begun. He'd requested this visit specifically. He wanted to walk through those doors as the same person who'd once stood behind the concierge desk, reorganizing brochures and trying to be invisible. Derek was still the assistant manager, though he'd grown significantly in his role. He'd become a mentor to new staff, particularly focusing on creating opportunities for overlooked talent. When he saw Marcus, he smiled warmly. "The prodigal intern returns," Derek said, shaking Marcus's hand. "Though I guess I should call you Mr. Washington now." "Please don't," Marcus laughed. "How are things?" "Good, really good. We have 3 interns this summer, and I'm actually letting them work with guests. Revolutionary concept, I know." They both laughed. The old tension was gone, replaced by mutual respect and shared understanding of how far they'd both come. Thomas appeared, looking distinguished with silver at his temples. "Marcus, I heard you were visiting. Do you have time for coffee?" The 3 of them sat in the lobby lounge, the same place where James had once positioned himself to watch Marcus and talked about the changes in the hotel and the industry in their own lives. "You know what I think about sometimes?" Thomas said. "That morning when you signed to a leaner, I was so annoyed that you'd interrupted me. Now I understand you weren't interrupting, you were showing me what I was missing, you were showing all of us." "I was terrified," Marcus admitted. "I almost didn't do it." "But you did, and it changed everything." Janine found them there an hour later. She was still working at the hotel, though now she was the head of housekeeping services. When she saw Marcus, her face lit up. "There's my favorite success story," she said, pulling him into a hug. "Look at you all fancy with your executive title." "I learned from the best," Marcus said. "You told me to stop letting people make me smaller than I was. I never forgot that." "Good, because you were never small, baby. You just needed someone to remind you." That evening, Marcus did something he'd been planning for months. He'd arranged a special dinner at the hotel's restaurant, and he'd invited specific guests. Alina Hartley, who'd become a friend and advisor on the company's accessibility initiatives. James Morrison, now happily retired but still involved as an advisor. Sandra Park, who'd become a close mentor. And Lily Chen, his childhood friend who'd reconnected with him 2 years ago and was now working as an ASL interpreter and disability rights advocate. As they gathered around the table, Marcus stood up to speak. "I brought you all together because each of you changed my life in a profound way. Alina, you showed me that being seen isn't a luxury, it's a basic human need. James, you saw potential in me when I couldn't see it in myself. Sandra, you taught me that administrative excellence and genuine care aren't mutually exclusive. And Lily." He turned to his oldest friend, who was watching him sign as he spoke, her eyes already glistening. "Lily, you were the first person who made me understand that learning to communicate with someone different from you isn't a burden, it's a gift. You taught me that real connection requires effort, intention, and genuine care. Everything I've built my career on started on your back porch when we were kids." He signed the last part so everyone could understand. "Thank you for showing me what it means to be truly seen and to truly see others." There wasn't a dry eye at the table. "So what's next for you?" James asked after they'd all composed themselves. "You've achieved more in 5 years than most people do in a career. What's your next mountain to climb?" Marcus smiled. "Actually, I've been working on something, a foundation. The See Me Foundation, focused on creating opportunities for young people who are overlooked in hospitality and service industries. Scholarships, mentorship programs, paid internships that actually develop talent. I want to make sure no young person feels the way I felt: invisible, undervalued, afraid to use their gifts." "That's beautiful," Alina signed. "How can I help?" "Actually, I was hoping you'd all be on the founding board. I want this to be about creating systemic change, not just feel-good stories. I want to change how the entire industry thinks about talent development." They all agreed immediately, and as they talked through the evening, brainstorming ideas and strategies, Marcus felt a profound sense of completeness. He'd come full circle, from being overlooked to being in a position to ensure others weren't. 10 years after that first morning, when Marcus had signed hello to a deaf guest, he returned to Meridian College for a very different purpose. The college was dedicating a new building, the Marcus Washington Center for Inclusive Hospitality Excellence. The ceremony was packed with students, faculty, industry leaders, and media. Marcus stood on the stage, looking out at the crowd, still amazed that this was his life. When it was his turn to speak, he pulled out a worn photograph, the one Lily had given him 15 years ago, showing 2 teenagers signing to each other on a back porch. "This photo," Marcus said, holding it up, "represents the moment I learned the most important lesson of my career. People are worth the effort. Communication is worth the effort. Understanding is worth the effort." He told the story of learning sign language just to be Lily's friend, of the shy intern who almost didn't help a guest, of the CEO who watched and waited and then stepped forward at exactly the right moment. The hospitality industry is built on a simple premise: people matter. But somewhere along the way, we sometimes forget that this applies to everyone, not just the guests we serve, but also the staff who serve them. We forget that the person filing paperwork might have gifts we've never bothered to discover. We forget that the quiet one might have the deepest insights. We forget that talent doesn't always announce itself loudly. He paused, his voice growing stronger. This center exists to make sure we don't forget. It exists to develop hospitality professionals who understand that excellence isn't about having all the answers, it's about asking the right questions. It's not about fitting a mold, it's about bringing your authentic self to service. It's not about being the loudest voice in the room, it's about making sure all voices are heard. To every student who feels overlooked, underestimated, or invisible, I see you. Your perspective matters, your gifts matter, you matter. Don't let anyone, including yourself, convince you otherwise. The world needs what you have to offer exactly as you are. The applause was thunderous. But what Marcus would remember most was the young woman who approached him afterward, shy, soft-spoken, with a name tag that read hospitality major. "Thank you," she said quietly. "I've been thinking about dropping out because I don't think I'm cut out for this industry, but your speech, you made me think maybe there's a place for people like me." Marcus smiled, seeing himself in her uncertainty. "There's not just a place for people like us. The industry needs people like us. Will you do me a favor?" "Of course. 10 years from now, when you're successful and someone tells you they don't think they're cut out for this work, I want you to tell them your story. Tell them how you almost gave up but didn't. Tell them how you found your voice. And then help them find theirs. That's how we change the industry, one overlooked person at a time, until no one is overlooked anymore." She nodded, her eyes bright with determination. "I will. I promise." As she walked away, Marcus felt James's hand on his shoulder. His mentor and friend had been watching the exchange. "You're doing exactly what you were meant to do," James said quietly. "I'm doing what you taught me to do. I'm paying forward what you gave me." "No, Marcus, I just opened a door. You walked through it, and then you built an entire building on the other side. This," he gestured at the new center, "this is all you." Marcus looked at the building, at the students flowing in and out, at the promise it represented. "It's all of us. Every person who chose to see instead of overlook, every person who chose to include instead of exclude, every person who chose to believe in potential instead of dismissing it. And it started with you signing hello to a woman in the hotel lobby." "No," Marcus corrected gently. "It started with you watching and deciding that moment mattered. It started with you caring enough to do something about it." They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over the campus, both of them thinking about the power of being seen and the responsibility of seeing others. That night, Marcus sat alone in his apartment, something he rarely did anymore. His life had become full of responsibilities, of relationships, of purpose. But tonight, he'd wanted quiet to reflect. He pulled out a journal he'd started keeping during his internship, back when he'd been trying to make sense of his experience. He flipped to the first entry, dated the morning after James had revealed his identity. "I don't understand what happened today," younger Marcus had written. "Why would the CEO of the company care about one overlooked intern? Why would he spend a week watching, evaluating, intervening? What made me worth his attention?" Now, 10 years later, Marcus wrote a new entry in answer to his younger self. "You asked why you were worth attention. Here's what I understand now. It was never a question of worth. Everyone has inherent worth. The question was whether someone would choose to see it. James Morrison chose to see it in you, but more importantly, he taught you to see it in yourself and in others. You were never invisible. You just couldn't see yourself clearly. And once you could, once someone showed you your own reflection without the distortion of fear and self-doubt, you became unstoppable. Not because you changed into someone different, but because you finally became fully yourself. The shy black intern who signed hello to a deaf guest, he was always extraordinary. He just needed someone to watch closely enough to notice." Marcus closed the journal and looked at the photo on his desk, the one Lily had given him all those years ago. Next to it was a new photo, taken at the center's dedication ceremony, showing him signing with a group of students, all of them smiling, all of them seen. He thought about the 16-year-old who had learned a whole language just to be someone's friend. He thought about the 23-year-old who had almost not signed hello because he was afraid of stepping outside his role. He thought about the 30-year-old who now helped others find their voice and their place. They were all the same person, Marcus Washington, who had learned that the most revolutionary act in a world that tries to make people invisible is simply being seen and seeing others in return. His phone buzzed with a message from James. "Proud of you, Marcus. Not for what you've achieved, but for who you've become. Sleep well, my friend." Marcus smiled and typed back. "Thank you for teaching me that being seen isn't about being noticed, it's about being understood. And thank you for understanding me before I understood myself." He set down his phone and looked out his window at the city lights. Somewhere out there were people who felt invisible, overlooked, undervalued. People who didn't know that their quiet strengths were actually strengths, that their differences were actually gifts, that their authentic selves were exactly what the world needed. He couldn't reach all of them, but he could reach some, and those some would reach others. And slowly, person by person, interaction by interaction, the culture would shift from overlooking to seeing, from dismissing to including, from assuming limitations to discovering possibilities. It had started with one simple gesture, a hello signed across a hotel lobby. But like all acts of genuine connection, it had rippled outward in ways Marcus never could have predicted, touching lives, changing systems, building a legacy. And it all came back to the fundamental truth that James Morrison had taught him. Everyone deserves to be seen, to be valued, to be given the chance to become fully themselves. Not someday, when they've proven themselves or earned it or finally become good enough. Now, today, in this moment. Because every person you meet is fighting a battle you know nothing about, carrying gifts you haven't discovered, containing possibilities you can't imagine. And your job, all of our jobs, is simply to pay attention. To watch closely, to see clearly, to sign hello when everyone else walks by, to care when it would be easier not to believe in potential even when it's hidden beneath layers of fear and self-doubt. That's what hospitality means. That's what humanity means. That's what love means. Marcus understood that now. And he'd spend the rest of his life teaching it to others, paying forward the gift James Morrison had given him, the gift of being truly seen and the responsibility of truly seeing others. He turned off the light and went to bed, ready for tomorrow, ready to see and be seen, ready for whatever moments of connection awaited. Because that's what life was, a series of chances to sign hello, to step forward, to choose seeing over overlooking. And Marcus Washington would never overlook that chance again.